My heart goes out to everyone in Los Angeles. This is all just a disaster, but they are reaping what they sow politically. Hey there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I have to take this Friday to talk about the multi-layered catastrophe going on in Los Angeles, California. As we sit here, the fire is not yet contained, and the devastation is unimaginable, and the incompetence on display is far more imaginable, actually. But let's get a ground level view, shall we?
There just are not enough fire crews able to deal with all the blazes that are going on. How's water? I mean, obviously Palisades have had water issues.
Our hydrant ran dry about 2 minutes ago. Because there's so many engines tapping the grid and multiple grids, we're basically just taking all the water out of the grid.
Just complete and utter devastation. I've been in a lot of these fires, a lot. Going back to Paradise, and this approximates Paradise.
Still no containment.
No, we're at zero containment.
What is the situation with the water? Obviously, in Palisades, ran out last night in the hydrants. I was talking to the firefighter on this block.
Let me just stop for a second. There's something so weird about Gavin Newsom. Like I know, like, we don't want to overread in a body language, but is he being flippant here? I know I'm going to assume that he's not being flippant, but this guy's just creepy. I'm sorry.
They left because there was no water in the hydrant here.
The local folks are trying to figure that out. I mean, just when you have a system that's not dissimilar to what we've seen in other extraordinarily large-scale fires, whether it be pipe, electricity, or whether it just be the complete overwhelm of the system. I mean, those hydrants are typical for 2 or 3 fires, maybe one fire. You have something at this scale, but again, that's got to be determined by the local.
I hate to even ask this question, but the president-elect chose to attack you, blame you for this.
One can't even respond to it. I mean, it's this guy wanted to politicize it. I have a lot of thoughts, and I know what I want to say. I won't.
President Trump knew what he wanted to say, and well, it was it was as Trumpy as we could expect, right? One of the best and most beautiful parts of the United States of America is burning to the ground. Its ashes, and Gavin Newsom should resign. This is all his fault. This is on Truth Social. Gavin Newsom. Is that statesmanly rhetoric? It is not. This is the world we're in. This is nothing new from President Trump. What's also not new for President Trump is actually being pretty aware of what's going on in California, both in terms of its water problems, its water management, and its forest management problems. This is one of the areas where he seems to at least be in touch with some of the details.
You know, your forests are dry as a bone.
Yeah.
Okay?
Dangerous.
That water could be routed. You know, you could have everything. Oh, not only dangerous, billions of dollars a year they spend on forest fires. And, you know, there's a case with the environment. They're not allowed to rake their forests because you're not allowed to touch it. When a tree falls down, after 18 months, it becomes very dry. It's like, you know, like real firewood. It's bad. And I every time I go to California, I said, you have so much water. They don't know it. I'm telling you, people living in Beverly Hills, they turn off the water. Same thing with the electric. They want to go to all electric cars, but they have brownouts every weekend, you know.
Well, right after they made the announcement that as of 2035, you're not going to be able to buy an internal combustion engine in California.
Yeah.
Like within a month, they had some announcement asking people to not charge their Teslas.
I'm just waiting for the footage of EVs exploding in extreme bombast from this fire because electric vehicles and their lithium batteries are even more catastrophically explosive than gasoline engines. But we'll come back to the various and sundry luxury beliefs at work in the Los Angeles area. When it comes to the relationship between President Trump and Governor Newsom, things weren't always quite so acrimonious. Going back to 2018 and the fire in Paradise, California, you see a very different tone than Newsom.
Is there any way to prevent this from happening again, Mr. President?
Well, we've been talking about that on the ride over, and I think we're all in the same path. We do have to do management, maintenance, and we'll be working also with environmental groups. They've really, I think everybody's seen the light.
Everybody's seen the light. I think the president spoke too soon in 2018 because just a couple years later, there was more fires. And of course, this is a very fire-prone area, as we all know. Fast forward a couple years, and you have this.
But those trees are dead, and therefore they're very flammable. They're explosive.
We can agree to disagree, and I appreciate your frame on the politics of this. But let me just acknowledge two things briefly, and I'll turn it back to you. There's no question when you look past this decade and looking past almost 1,000+ years that we have not done justice on our forest management. I don't think anyone disputes that.
This is one of the things about politics. We have these problems. We get all these promises. They don't get solved. And Gavin Newsom is remarkably good at acknowledging problems that he says he's there to solve and not solving them and continuing to acknowledge that there's problems that need to be solved, I guess, by magic, whether it's homelessness or forest management or any number of things in California. This is a recurrent pattern at this point, not just with Newsom, but with every politician more or less. But Newsom is expert at sounding empathetic about the problems he promised he would solve for everybody.
We acknowledge our role and responsibility to do more in that space. And final point,
And this is where we get into the, EVs for everyone luxury beliefs category.
Negligent, and this is not, and we've known each other too long, and as you suggest, the working relationship I value. We obviously feel very strongly that the hots are getting hotter, the dries are getting drier. When we're having heat domes, the likes of which we've never seen in our history, the hottest August ever in the history of the state, the ferocity of these fires, the drought, 5+ years, losing 163 million trees to that drought, something's happened to the plumbing of the world. And we come from a perspective, humbly, where we submit the science in and observed evidence is self-evident.
The science is in, folks. These fires have nothing to do with anything we're doing. They're global climate change, and we need to reorganize our society around that, even though the Chinese are going to do no such thing, and they don't care how many EVs we have in California, and they produce more carbon dioxide than all of the continental U.S. times 2 or 3. But this is the malformed set of priorities that are animating what's going on in California and in a lot of places around the country, a lot of cities around the country.
That climate change is real, and that is exacerbating this. And so I think there's an area of at least commonality on vegetation, forest management, but please respect, and I know you do, the difference of opinion out here as it relates to this fundamental issue.
Again, the politicization of weather events is on full display, or it was then, and that's what that is. That is a politicization of the forest fires to talk about climate change. Climate change really isn't the primary mover here in this issue. But it gets so much worse as far as governance is concerned, because the mayor of Los Angeles, well, the video on this really speaks for itself.
Do you owe citizens an apology for being absent while their homes were burning? Do you regret cutting the fire department budget by millions of dollars, Madam Mayor? Have you nothing to say today? Have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today? Elon Musk says that you're utterly incompetent. Are you considering your position?
What's going on here? What's happening?
Madam Mayor, have you absolutely nothing to say to the citizens today who are dealing with this disaster? No apology for them?
I don't know what that is. I don't know. This is the business you've chosen, madam. So I don't get it. I was in New York City during 9/11 when the towers came down, and, kind of the whole country got to see Rudy Giuliani, who, has obviously is a bizarre figure. Is he in prison? I'm not sure if he's in prison, but Rudy Giuliani, at least when the chips were down in a time of crisis, would string a sentence together. I can imagine Rudy Giuliani's response to sort of gonzo journalism, catching him at the airport, and it wouldn't be to stare autistically without responding or acknowledging you're being talked to. Leadership is about being able to handle yourself and communicate in a crisis. Shame on the voters of Los Angeles for picking this lady over a Roomba. I mean, this is just a catastrophe. It just so happens I was actually having lunch with Michael Schellenberger earlier today, and we were talking about what's going on. He's a longtime Californian. He ran for governor a couple years back, and I think his commentary on this has been spot on. He knows what's going on from the inside out when it comes to California's interaction with environmental regulations and all of the machinations of government in California on this front.
Over the next few weeks, you're going to hear Governor Gavin Newsom, Mayor Karen Bass, and the Democratic Party tell you that there's nothing that could have been done to prevent the catastrophic fires from ravaging Los Angeles. Those will be lies. They could have prevented them. Governor Gavin Newsom cut the funding for preventing forest fires and failed to build sufficient water resources for fighting fires. Mayor Karen Bass cut $17.5 million in funding for the Los Angeles Fire Department and then went to Ghana, even though she knew of the risk of catastrophic fires. Now, it's true that California in general, and Los Angeles in particular, are fiery places, and it's true that Santa Ana winds made the fires worse. But Newsom and Bass have known about those hazards for all of their careers and failed to deal with them. The rank incompetence, the lack of leadership is shocking and scandalous.
That is absolutely true, especially by the mayor in particular. The lack of leadership fundamentally, functionally.
It's hard to overstate how badly they screwed up water management in particular. Los Angeles firefighters haven't had the water they needed. Newsom hasn't built the new water reservoirs that Los Angeles needed. And Newsom even cut the budget for water infrastructure projects last year. So why is that? Well, part of the reason is that they were focused on other things. Making the fire department more racially diverse, climate change, homelessness. And the reason they were focused on those things is because those are what the radical left that controls the Democratic Party wanted them to focus on. Year after year, they do nothing while focusing on things like trans and Trump and climate and ignoring the things that really matter to the people of California.
Now, this video has been making the rounds, but I think it does underline that what Michael Schellenberger and others are saying about the priorities in Southern California, in Los Angeles County, and their repercussions aren't BS.
Welcome back to CBS Saturday Morning. The city of Los Angeles swore in a new fire chief yesterday, and for the first time in history of the department, she is a woman.
Amazing. The most amazing thing ever. Can you believe it?
Kristen Crowley will lead the nation's third largest firefighting force in our second biggest city as a push for diversity continues in a male-dominated field. And this is huge for diversity. She's not only the first woman, also the first LGBTQ person to take this position.
Can I just say, she's not an LGBTQ person. She's a lesbian. What is this? I'm an LGBTQ person. That's not a thing. That's some metaphysical conglomeration category. She's a woman. She's a lesbian. That's fine. You can just say that. I don't know why that matters for being the chief of fire. It doesn't, actually. It doesn't. And maybe we're finally starting to wake up from this psychotic trance we're in, focused on tribes like ancient Babylon. But I don't think any of that matters. And I'm pretty sure this has all come back to haunt Los Angelinos.
Perfect position to start and to prioritize that work environment, especially from the diversity, equity, and inclusion side.
Prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion at the fire department.
Crowley says the key to fixing that is having more diversity on the department, which is why they offer girls' camps and outreach.
It's going to make us a stronger team so we can ultimately serve the community in a better capacity.
Focusing on DEI in the fire department literally makes the fire department weaker, physically weaker.
What are the challenges of being a woman?
Size. I would say that was probably my biggest hurdle. This equipment isn't built for someone that's, 5'4" and 100 and maybe 30 pounds soaking wet some days.
5'4" and 130 pounds soaking wet. Well, don't worry about the soaking wet because there's no water in California to soak you wet. But I don't have anything against this young woman, but this is ridiculous. There are 7 million, roughly, prime working age males. This is like between 18 and 54, unemployed in America. And I guarantee at least 1 million of them are in California, if not 2 to 3. You're telling me that as a chief of a fire department, your first priority, if you need to beef up the force, which you clearly do, wouldn't be to tap into the reserve army of unemployed bros that are having a blast playing Call of Duty. I mean, if anything, you should be making video games to train young men to be firefighters, and then, like the last Starfighter, recruiting them from the e-store. I mean, I don't... This is what you call luxury beliefs. And Los Angeles is the land of luxury beliefs. It's the land of fairy tales. It's the land of Hollywood. And I don't wish any ill upon anyone in Los Angeles. I have too many friends in Los Angeles. I have too many people I care about who happen to live in the Los Angeles area. This is all just a disaster. But they are reaping what they sow politically by voting for people on the basis of virtue signaling instead of being capable of doing the most basic kind of governance that a city and a state should be doing. We are forced to pay for what we are told are essential services: police, utilities, fire protection. And time and again now, we're seeing that abstract utopian ideas are taking priority. And when they take priority, they literally take time and money and energy away from the basic good government that we should all expect, especially at the level of the city. Cities are really important. In a lot of ways, cities are the foundation of civilization. The word civilization itself is rooted in the word civitas, which stands for city. And this is actually where government and governance is the closest to our daily lives. This is where our potholes get fixed or left to rot and sink deeper. This is the management of our kids' schools. I don't think it should be, but it is. This is all the things that constitute reality are happening at the level of our cities. Half of our population lives in cities. And so we are constantly told about all these magical, wonderful things and this grand utopian vision that politicians will usher in for us, especially at the national level. We just got out of a year and a half of presidential politics. Why should we believe a word any of these people tell us when they can't manage the most basic elements of running our cities? And the answer is we shouldn't. There's going to be a lot more to come out of this. This is an ongoing story. The fires are destroying people's lives. And, there's going to be plenty of people on the internet jumping up and down for joy that Mark Hamill's mansion burned to the ground because he's such a kind of loud and kind of crazy lefty and whatever. I don't think that's reasonable. We shouldn't want other people to suffer even when we disagree with them. I don't think that's good or kind or Christian. My heart goes out to everyone in Los Angeles. I hope they can find safety. I hope they can rebuild their lives. And that turns to the next level of sort of blue state Hunger Games nonsense that lies ahead. And fellow friend of the show, Adam Carolla, had a rant on Twitter that was truly spectacular on this front. And I know the stuff he's talking about quite well because we talked about it on our episode about construction and getting things done in the physical world.
So here's what's going to happen. Let me just give you guys a little primer of what's going to happen. You know how Bill Maher seems real conservative now when he's like arguing with Jane Fonda about regulations, too many regulations, like strangling everything? Because remember, when Bill Maher tried to put solar in his house in Beverly Hills, that's when he turned against the government because he saw what the government and the overreach of government and overregulation does. He got strangled. It took him 3 years to build a solar shack. He had a whole countdown on his show, day 1,000 since I've got my permit for my solar. He turned. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. All these people who were deep blue Democrats are now going to have to pull a permit to rebuild. And they're going to get the 28-year-old bitch from the Coastal Commission telling them to go fuck off. There's going to be a whole bunch of rich people, and they're going to go, I'm rebuilding, and I want to rebuild as fast as I can. And between the part where they go in to the Planning Commission and plan check and initially and try to pull a permit to the time the first load of lumber, the first load of 2x4s is dropped off on their lot where their house formerly stood, it's going to be 3 years. And 1,000 permits and 1,000 arguments and 1,000 discussions with the Coastal Commission. You guys all voted for Karen Bass, the mayor of Los Angeles. You all voted for Gavin Newsom. And now you fucking get what you get.
He's not wrong. You get what you get. H.L. Mencken said that democracy is the theory that the people know what they want and deserve to get it good and hard. And I can understand. This is Adam Carolla at peak H.L. Mencken form. But what he's touching on here is the next phase of disaster. So we have the natural disasters of forest fires, and then we have the man-made disaster of how impossible it is to build anything in these cities. And not just Los Angeles. This permeates blue state governance, blue city governance. I'm here in Austin, Texas, and Austin is a slowpoke. They're not as slow as California. They're not as slow as the San Francisco Bay Area or Los Angeles, but it is punishing to get things done. It is ridiculous to purchase a plot of land and be told how many trees you're allowed to cut down. I'm sorry, they're my trees. I get to cut them down. But that is the world we're in. Utopian dreams give rise to utterly incomprehensible rules and regulations, all of which are the product of a political process that really should be left to we the people to decide for ourselves. In our neighborhoods, frankly. Houston, Texas has some of the lowest housing costs of any American city, and it basically lacks a lot of the zoning rules and regulations that strangle Californians. This is the problem. This is the sort of double whammy, double screw job you get with top-down, hyper-utopian progressive governance. They want to deliver us utopia, and what they deliver is disaster, both natural and man-made. What do we do about that? Well, I think one of the things that these moments offer as a teachable lesson is that our city elections actually matter a lot. And very often, city and local elections are just simply ignored because they aren't flashy. It's not glamour. Our national politics is literally the stuff of Hollywood. You know, President Trump, he has a long-standing relationship with Governor Newsom because until he became president, he was a Hollywood celebrity. He worked in television. He was on The Apprentice. We have Hollywood government, and we need a lot more brass tacks, get shit done government at the local level. And until we as a public redirect our attention to that and prioritize the brass tacks of what we should expect out of our cities and our states, we're going to get more and more nonsense. And you can only spend other people's money for so long, but eventually the chickens come home to roost. And that's what's happened here in California with this devastating fire. That is what's happened in California even more broadly with all the problems that have turned it into sort of a disaster zone that's bleeding population. And we should just pray to God that that ideology is put to rest and doesn't resurface at the national scale. I mean, at the end of the day, that's the best lesson we can take away from all of this. There's only so many things we can do as individuals when a crisis like this emerges. The precautionary principle is useful here. And that's to say, governance matters. Pay attention to the things you care about. And don't just vote on the basis of luxury beliefs and fairy tales. I think there is a deeper cultural problem going on here. And that is that too often our political class comes from the world of talkers, not doers, of the lawyers, the consultants, the speechifiers. That's Gavin Newsom to a T. And I think that one of the things I happen to like about President Trump is he actually had to contend with building things in New York City of all places. He is a talker, he is a TV guy, but I'd like to see, and I think we should all want to see, more leaders step up to the plate who know how to build something, how to get things done. And I think if we could prioritize that instead of fancy talk and fairy tales, we might just be able to avoid the kind of disasters that have hit us and that are currently ravaging the people of Los Angeles. So here's to a return to some basic common sense as we head into this new year. Have a great weekend.